Hello, Mike Fish from Minnesota Real Estate and Management, and today I'm going to discuss a question that we get a lot. And I may vary compared to a lot of brokers on this. Definitely, I used to back in the day, maybe a little bit more balanced approach nowadays. But I will say that one of my many beefs with the industry, with my colleagues at times, is realtors giving sellers and buyers advice that is really making it easier for the agent to get a quick deal and get paid that isn't always maybe in the best interest of the seller. Rather than take a step back and say, what's really best for this seller? Now, I'd like to think that um, every agent does this, but I will say that there's a little bit of gray area on many issues, and the issue of what should I do to sell my property is one of them. I've always leaned towards telling people if someone's going to buy a property for, $800,000, they're going to buy it because they want it, and they're not going to not buy it because it's got this little defect or that little defect. That being said, there is something for curb appeal, and there's kind of like two schools of thought, right? In fact, I just had an agent look at a property I have for sale, immaculate, completely remodeled property. And the only comment I got to her from her was, I would bring in a stager, and put in a bunch of furniture here and get everything staged. Well, I mean, if my sellers had the money and wanted to do that, we could do that, right? Like, there's so many things you can do. But the question becomes, in the end, is the return on the investment there for the sellers? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Most sellers, in my opinion, are a lot more worried about getting everything looking perfect to sell um, than they need to be. But that being said, when you get into the higher end houses, um, it's important. There's some important things to consider. Okay, now I'm going to put septic and water in the well in there. Um, that's of course normally not something that needs to be repaired, but I strongly suggest if you're going to sell your lake home, plan to get or any home in Crow Wing or in the area, plan to get a septic and water test up front. We ask sellers to do that so we can put it on the MLS. Then buyers don't even have to worry about it. It's a much smoother process. And the last thing you want to do is go up and be up and on, get an offer, and then find out that you do have some type of septic issue to deal with. Then at least you know up front, get the inspections, and you can deal with it up front. As I guess I would say that's something I would put in there as something sellers may want to consider. Right? The other areas that are a good return on your investment is shoreline cleanup, dock repair, kind of the presentation of the dock. You want to make sure, I mean, again, we're looking at the little things you can do, curb appeal to get the most return on your investment, clean up that shoreline. Again, there's exceptions. I've sold great houses where the shoreline hasn't been touched in 10 years and really needed to be cleaned up. And the buyers are like, well, there's a project for us, right? But cleaning up the shoreline and the dock, getting the weeds pulled as much as possible. I would say that's, if it's a lake home, as much as a DNR will let you do, that's a big one. Um, Particularly minor exterior repairs. If you do have anything that you walk around the house and you're like, especially around windows, a lot of times they're just a very small repair around a window, but when someone sees that right away, the buyer's going, oh man, has it been there for 15 years? Is there tons of rot in there, etc. So again, we're not talking about residing the house or putting, tens of thousands of dollars into it, but walking around the outside and saying, are there any small repairs that you notice that can be fixed, for a little bit of money, especially around windows and doorways and things like that. And the same thing inside. Deep cleaning and decluttering. We have professional companies we do bring in to do this. If you're busy or or you're not in the area, I regularly work with estate situations, and there's been multiple times where we've had the seller says, I don't want all this stuff. The buyer says, I don't want all this stuff, and we are dealing with all that stuff. So I will tell you there's certain things we do on these lakes because the majority of our buyers are remote. So there are things that we do that are maybe somewhat unique, but we get the job done. So decluttering is a big part of it. Ideally before pictures, whether it's a garage, whether it's the kitchen, etc. That certainly helps. Um, the things that I don't encourage people to do that some people are surprised of, other than maybe, light painting. I will add flooring to this. Sometimes sometimes you're much better off if you've got, an old carpet that's beyond its time. You're better off throwing down, even if it's, a medium quality, throwing down different flooring is another thing that can be very cost effective for a return on your investment when you're looking to sell a nice home. What I don't encourage is the idea that you've got to go spend $10,000-15,000 remodeling the kitchens, remodeling the bathrooms, doing more high-end landscaping. A lot of folks feel like they need to do, reconfiguring rooms, switching out windows, things like that. Those are things that you're not going to necessarily get a great return on your investment. And so for the most part, minor cleanup and repairs is what I encourage. Certainly people have different opinions. If I've got a seller that says, hey, I want to do this, I've got 10,000 cash, I want to put into this, where's the best place for me to put into it so I can sell it, maybe get that $10,000 difference? I love to have that conversation. Go around and we make those decisions or help you make those decisions. That being said, in general, if you're selling a house of any kind and you're putting 100,000 into it or 50,000 into it, you're not going to get 100,000 more for it or 50,000 more for it. If you go kind of beyond these curb appeal type repairs, the one thing I will add to this, which I think is another kind of thing that I would put with the beach cleanup, whether it's a lake home or not a lake home, all the yard cleanup can be huge. Just cleaning out the brush, trimming things, particularly on the lakes when you're considering the view, doing tree trimming, bringing in a professional tree trimmer to come in, clean up the trees, clean up the yard. Because most folks that are buying a lake home, they're buying it to enjoy the yard, to enjoy the view, to enjoy the lake. And I have seen multi-million-dollar houses that you look out on the lake and the trees haven't been trimmed in 20 years and you can't see the lake. And I've had many buyers walk through houses, some buy, some don't, and they're like, first thing I'm gonna do is clear out some of this so that I get a better lake view. So just something to consider. I think it's also a consideration even what lake you're on. Like for example, obviously on Gull and around Cross Lake, people are looking for more of the luxury homes, and they're looking for the granite countertops and things like that. When you get into a certain price range, either they've got certain expectations, and that's maybe a little bit of a different conversation, but that it's important to consider your competition. For what it's worth, I always say I can have an opinion, my seller can have an opinion, a buyer can have an opinion, but whether that house is going to sell or not, that selling price is actually dictated by the house down the street. Because either you want to sell it this time or you don't, and there's someone down the street selling their house for the same amount or less, etc. So it's really important to look at the market in that way too. But when you think about like Pelican, you're getting more into recreation use for the most part. When you're getting into, Mille Lacs, you're getting more into fishing. So each lake tends to kind of have its flavor a little bit too. So some are more recreational, like groups, others are more fishing lakes, others are more, people are looking for more high-end luxury, and that's something to consider too as you make these decisions, like is there anything that I need to do to sell my house fast for the absolute most money possible. So I'd encourage you to take some time, have some conversations. It's worth it before you start spending tens of thousands of dollars to do your investigation, to gauge what's worth doing and what's not necessary. And it really depends on the seller. Some sellers say, hey, I've got the money, I want to spend a few months making this perfect before I put it on the market. Others aren't in that situation. And so it's a very, like many, like probably every aspect, of real estate, it's a personal decision. But hopefully this gives you a little guidance, a few things to think about. And again, I tend to be a little bit more minimalistic than a lot of brokers. I don't think the average seller um, gets a dollar per dollar return on their investment for what they're doing unless they're very careful. And we're talking about, again, to recap, deep cleaning, decluttering, um, some minor repairs, paint, flooring, those types of things. Going up and beyond those types of things won't necessarily get the seller more money, might help the house sell a little bit faster depending on the situation. And so that's my general take on it. So reach out. We would love to come and look at your property, personally analyze it. What you'll never get is an ounce of pressure from us. We don't believe in that. We believe these are huge decisions made by our sellers, and we're humbled when they trust us to be part of their journey. But what you're not going to get is an ounce of pressure or manipulation from us. What you are going to get is some perspective and the guidance to the best of our ability to help you make the decision that's right for you. So again, this is Mike Fish from Minnesota Real Estate and Management. Hopefully this content is brings some value to you. Depending on where you see it, go ahead and subscribe, like, stay in touch. We would love to earn your trust and business. Thank you.